everybody? It's Dakota, and it's Monday, so for the sake of making things seem a little bit more uniform and scheduled on my channel, I'm going to be doing some different deck techs throughout the week that line up with some fancy terms that everybody's been using for probably since the inception of these formats. So, with it being Monday, I'm obviously bringing you a deck from Modern that I think is pretty sweet. It won the SCG Open in Knoxville last week, or I guess about 8 days ago now at this point. The deck is really sweet. I wanted to go over it. Aaron Barrich is the person who played this deck and won the event. Basically, what's going on here is abusing Yawgmoth Thran Physician with cards like Yawgmoth and Stranglerootgeist and Giralf's Messenger to essentially make an infinite combo where you just drain your opponent to death with Giralf's Messenger or using Blood Artist to drain your opponent to death. So basically the engine and the things that you're looking for in this deck obviously is Yawgmoth and getting two undying creatures like a Yawgmoth or a Stranglerootgeist or Giralf's Messenger, Yawgmoth, whatever. And in doing that, you can pay life and sacrifice a creature to put a -1/-1 counter on up to one creature and then draw a card, which is the important part, is putting the -1/-1 counter on a creature, because how Undying works is that if a creature dies and it didn't have a +1/+1 counter on it, you return it to the battlefield under its owner's control with a +1/+1 counter on it. It's not like any of the older or newer mechanics where they try to stop this sort of thing from being abused, where if it dies once, it doesn't come back the next time. Undying just cares that when it died, if it had a +1/+1 counter on it or not. And if it didn't, then it comes back with one. If it does, then it doesn't come back. And with Yawgmoth, you can just put a -1/-1 counter on one of your Undying creatures that has already come back with the counter on it to remove the counter, and then sacrifice it to remove a counter from another Undying creature to then have it come back into play, because obviously it died without the +1/+1 counter on it. This is a weird, at first glance, an unintuitive creature combo deck, because you're essentially trying to assemble two different creature combos. And what's the advantage to playing this kind of a creature combo deck versus like the Vizier Devoted Druid combo decks that we've seen, and like Spike Feeder, Spike Feeder, and not Restoration Angel, Archangel of Thune combo decks, is that this just wins the game. This combo wins the game the turn that you can play Yawgmoth, assuming your opponent doesn't find a way to exile one of your Undying creatures with the trigger on the stack. So basically, how the heck is this deck getting its combo and assembling it? So you have some ramp with like Birds of Paradise and Noble Hierarch to just kind of get things rolling. Playing Birds over Noble, because really you're not attacking in this deck a whole lot. Sometimes it helps because there is times where you have to be up on life on your opponent to kill them. Unless you win with the one of Blood Artist, then it doesn't matter, because you're gaining back the life that you're losing to start the combo. You just have to make sure you're at 2 life when you do this, because you have to pay a life to Yawgmoth to sacrifice the creature to get things going. So, Once Upon a Time, proven once again, it's very powerful. Finds a creature or land, finds whatever you're missing, could find a combo piece, could find just a mana accelerant. Does a lot of things, just really powerful card, always playing it. Court of Calling isn't restricted to finding green creatures, just finds any creature as long as its converted mana cost is X or less. You have a lot of these like dorky creatures, like your 1-drop mana dorks, your Yawgmoth, Strangleroot, and Wall of Roots, that you can just easily chord for X = 4 to go get a Yawgmoth. Sometimes you can go 5 and get the Cavalier Knight if you really need to, and start going off from there, or tutor up one of your missing like Undying creatures if you already have a Yawgmoth. Eldritch Evolution turns your Stranglerootgeists and Wall of Roots into Yawgmoths. It can turn your birds into Giralf's Messengers, things like that. And that's important too because Eldritch Revolution with these undying creatures that if they just again get sacrificed and they didn't have a counter on it, they come back, and then Yawgmoth into Giralf's Messenger when you already have a Yawgmoth in play is infinite, because then you just get to drain your opponent to death with Giralf's Messenger. Going through like the lands and stuff like that, playing 20 lands. Obviously, don't need that many when you have a bunch of dorks that you can play on turn one, plus the Once Upon a Time, or if you don't have a land, like this could very easily just be a land to kind of get yourself going. Blooming Marsh, just a painless green-black land that comes into play untapped on the first few turns of the game, which ideally you could probably win like turn 4, turn 3 with this deck with a lot of draws, but you're kind of grindy enough to where you don't have to win on turn 3 or turn 4, and it's kind of the beauty of this deck. 2 basic forests, because why not? Colony Garden can also get you going. If both your Undying creatures have counters on them, you can play a Colony Garden. Sacrifice the plant to put a -1/-1 counter on one of the Undying creatures, and then kind of go off from there. Nurturing Peatland, while it's a painful green-black source, it does come into play untapped and eventually draws you a card leader. Overgrown Tomb, just always good to play some shock lands. Comes into play untapped for 2 life. Doesn't have to if you don't want it to. Swamp, important, play around those Blood Moons. Twilight Mire does put in some work because it does allow you to go double black or double green when you lead on like Swamp on turn 1. Or if you play a forest, you can play. I hope you play your Giralf's Messenger on like turn 3 by filtering your basic forest into double black. Urborg, turn everything into swamps. We got a lot of black mana symbols. Urborg's pretty sweet, and we essentially get to play for free. Verdant, searching up all of our important lands and that things. In the sideboard, you definitely want to be more reactive to what's going on. So Thoughtseizes, if your opponent's just trying to rest in peace you or disrupt you. I mean, we are a combo deck, so like taking like their own Thoughtseizes or their sideboard cards to essentially stop you from going off. Like Thoughtseize just kind of answers it all. Veil of Summer for the control decks when we really need our spells to resolve. Also, 1 mana Cryptic Command is good from what I'm told, and it is still good even after the bannings. Abrupt Decay and Assassin's Trophy, a way to diverse your removal suite. Abrupt Decay killing like things like Rest in Peace and the other cards that could just stop you from having a graveyard. Besides Leyline, but Leyline's not really played that much. But if that does become a problem, Assassin's Trophy is a card that you can play that just is a catch-all to any problem permanents. Good against Tron, things like that. Damping Sphere, another one that just beats like the Amulet Titan decks, and also good against Tron. Revoker as like a card that you can tutor up. Actually, it looks like a lot of these cards like towards the bottom are just like tutor targets that you can get with Quarter Calling or go into with like Eldritch Evolution or fine with Once Upon a Time. Revoker, basically a Pithing Needle with legs, but it can't name lands, but it does stop mana abilities, so that's pretty cool. Yixlid Jailer, removing, saying that all cards or cards in graveyards lose all abilities. Basically, like shutting down like Snapcaster Mages, things like that, stopping like Storm and all that fun stuff. Kitchen Finks is just a good value card against Burn. Always good that it gains 4 life. Probably trades with like 1 or 2 creatures, and the fact that like Giralf can kind of get it going too, even though it has Persist instead of Undying. Still just a really good card, really powerful, and you can tutor it up. And it's a good thing to sacrifice to Eldritch Evolution, because then you can bring it back, gain your 2 life, and then go get a Cavalier if you need to. Plague Engineer just really good against the tribal creature decks. Plague Engineer has always been good against humans. Sneakily good against Death Shadow, things like that. 3 mana 2/2 Death Toucher that kills a lot of X1s when it comes into play. Just a really powerful card, especially because it only affects your opponent's creatures. Reclamation Sage, Bronzodon play essentially the same role, except Bronzodon's a little bit bigger. You can feasibly bring it in against more aggressive decks, and they have to waste 2, maybe 3 cards to deal with it, which is totally fine. Reclamation Sage, definitely more of the I can tutor for this, and then play it, and it does something immediately when it comes into play, so that's really cool. And Obstinate Baloth, another card for burn, more than likely against Jund and stuff like that. Like you can just kind of get them with Liliana plus, put this into play, and start pressuring their Liliana on top of, you know, just being a big enough body to insulate you enough, hopefully to where you have ample amount of time to assemble your combo and kill your opponent. And that's the gist of this Golgori Yawgmoth deck. Really powerful, really sweet. I don't know exactly like how good it is once the meta kind of adjusts to the bannings and stuff, because this did take place the day before we had Oko and Michelson's Lattice and Mox Opal banned. I have a feeling that this deck kind of gets better because it had like a decent matchup against Urza. The Urza decks change, and I don't foresee any decks that are coming up to really beat this deck. You know, like even like the fast, like aggressive decks, like you have all these 1 drops with 1 and 2 drops of like Undying that just like come back, and then you have ways to bring them back, and then you're also playing multiple copies of them. So even if you're Strangleroot Geist, uh, blocking kills like 2 creatures, you know, you 2-for-1 them essentially with Strangleroot, and it possibly traded up too, you know, for just 2 mana, which is really good. And then Yawgmoth also just kind of like able to kind of machine gun down small creatures if you're not able to combo off, and can draw you a ton of cards. So that's gonna be it for this deck. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Check it out, play it. It's really sweet. Highly recommend it. Please be sure to leave a like on the video if you enjoyed it. Consider subscribing to my channel. I do a lot of Modern and Pioneer weekly. I'm going to be getting into Standard right now because Theros Beyond Death is just came out is going to be coming out next week, or next weekend, excuse me. And there's going to be some sweet stuff in there. They're probably going to see a lot of play in Pioneer, Modern, and of course Standard, making a huge impact there because there's a lot of powerful cards. So be sure to subscribe so you can see those kind of things. I also make some other content stuff towards like the end of the week. I know people just really like talking about the decks, playing, and all that fun stuff. So I try to stick to that. Also, make sure to follow me on Twitch for when I go live. I don't do a lot of Magic there. I'm going to be doing a little bit more, but mainly we just go to hang out and like play fun decks and stuff like that. So yeah, that's going to do it for me. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.